For a generation of Alabama fans, Sunday afternoons meant one thing: the Bear Bryant Show. Hundreds of thousands tuned in every week, but very few people ever saw what happened behind the cameras. Today, we get that rare look. Julie Strauss McLaughlin was right there in the middle of it, helping produce the show and working closely with Golden Flake, one of the brands most tied to Coach Bryant's legacy. She's going to take us behind the scenes and share what the weekly grind of putting that show together was really like, along with some great stories about Coach Bryant and the crew who made it all happen. Tommy, why don't you introduce Julie and get us started?
Well, thank you, Rick. It is our honor and pleasure today to have Julie Strauss McLaughlin with us. Julie was with Frank Taylor Advertising, and then in 1980 became marketing director for Golden Flake and was in that position for 33 years. But the thing that Julie is best known for is her involvement in the classic Bear Bryant Show. And before we get started, I want to tell a quick story about the Bear Bryant Show. Growing up in Gadsden in the early 70s, my Sunday routine was going to Sunday school, church, going to lunch with my parents. Then we would run to the neighborhood football field and play full-fledged tackle football for a couple of hours. But at about 3:45, the game just stopped. And then we all scattered to get back home by 4 o'clock to hear those 4 rings of Denny chimes and the Bear Bryant Show. And it was a cultural phenomenon, and I know we'll get into that with Julie today. But Julie, it's great to have you. Great to see you again.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the Bear Bryant Show itself, about Frank Taylor, his and Coach Bryant's friendship from all the way back to the early 30s, and how the Frank Taylor Advertising, and how did all that start, the genesis of the Bear Bryant Show?
When Coach Bryant came back in '58, he produced a local show himself. And then in '60, Mr. Taylor, who went to school with Coach at the university in the mid-30s, went to him and said, I have 2 sponsors that would like to sponsor your show and take it statewide. So in 1960, it became the Bear Bryant Show.
Wow.
And we sent it out statewide.
Now, Julie, how did you become involved in the show? Tell us a little bit about your production responsibilities in that as well.
I went to work for Frank Taylor Advertising, and if you worked for Frank Taylor, you were going to work the Sunday show or work the Saturday film crew. So it was all part and parcel of the working for Frank Taylor Advertising. But it was a chance of a lifetime to be associated with the university and Coach Bryant and all that history.
Yeah. Julie, you mentioned the 2 sponsors that Frank Taylor told Coach Bryant that he had. Obviously, they were Coca-Cola and Golden Flake. The great pair says the bear. That was the famous, iconic saying that came from that show. He already had, or Frank Taylor Advertising already had those as established clients and brought them to the show and suggested that be it.
Right. He was already representing Coke and Golden Flake in their advertising and took them the idea of producing or sponsoring the Bear Bryant Show. And they bought in. They were both Alabama football people.
Yeah.
Well,
Preacher Franklin and Mr. Rashitsky.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Rick?
Julie, walk us through what a typical production looked like, from the game being shot with the camera crews through editing process to really kind of getting the show ready to broadcast.
It was a whole lot of work and a whole lot of people. There were 6 or 7 people on the camera crew, and they would leave the day before, take 2 cars if it was within driving range. If not, they would fly on Golden Flake's plane. And if it was way out on the West Coast, Washington or California, Coach Bryant would let the crew fly with the team out those distances. And then this was film, this was not videotape. So they had to get back, it had to be processed, then put together, and we would get to the TV station, we would type a play-by-play of all the plays that we were included and time it out and air live at 4 o'clock.
Julie, I'm trying to imagine that scene, and that had to be organized chaos with
It
all
was.
the number of people that had to be involved to be able to get all that together. And because that's a massive amount of information to be able to compile, and especially to do all that by hand.
And be on the air at 4 o'clock. There was no, it was 10 more minutes or we're going to be a half an hour late. 4 o'clock, the cameras opened up and we fed 6 TV stations.
But Julie, I mentioned to you before, and you said you remembered it, although it's been almost 50 years ago. In 1977, I went to the set of the Bear Bryant Show and did two stories in the Crimson White on the production of the Bear Bryant Show, and had a great interview with Charlie Thornton, who I already knew real well. And it was really a fascinating day on the set. But then it was taped at like 11 in the morning, right? When did it go from live at 4 o'clock to being taped later in the morning?
We were from 4 to 5, and we were on an NBC stations basically, and we would preempt the second NFL game and run the Bear Bryant Show, and followed us from 5 to 6 was the Auburn Show.
Right.
And then in about 79, Channel 13 told us that they had to carry the second game of the NFL, and they offered us 10 to 10:30 on Sunday night, or 10:30 to 11 on Sunday night. And we argued we couldn't possibly go on at 10 o'clock and be a half an hour show. But Coach Bryant would talk through the 1 hour and we'd have to cut him off. So a half an hour was impossible. So Auburn did switch to a half an hour show, and they went from 10 to 10:30 on Sunday night. And we went to Channel 6, WBRC, and asked them if they would take us in an hour format. And they would only take us in the hour format from 12 to 1 because they didn't want to have all 3 stations football. And so they said they would give us at 12 o'clock, that we had no choice. So we went from 12 to 1. But the interesting thing was, when we moved to Channel 6 at 12 o'clock, we started getting complaints from churches and restaurants and country clubs because they weren't coming out no one was going out to eat because they had to get home to see the show. And people were leaving church early. So some of the churches changed their 11 o'clock service to 10:30, and
amazing.
The country club and the restaurants started putting televisions in their restaurants. And so we claim we invented the sports bar.
That's amazing. That is cool.
It was, like Tommy said, it was must-see TV.
Julie, we were talking earlier, and I'm curious to know, do you have any idea about the ratings during those years?
We outrated the NFL game that was on opposite us. We would have 15 ratings and 85 shares.
So that means 85% of the television in the state of Alabama were on that show.
Right. Yes.
Unreal.
Anyway, nationally, they had the syndicated television sports shows, and you had to be on 6 stations, and you couldn't be a network broadcast. It had to be a syndicated show. We would win that every year as the highest rated nationally, except towards the end, Coach Dooley, when he had Herschel Walker, beat us one year.
Wow.
And Hayden Fry, and I don't know who, I know who he is, Iowa, I don't know why.
I wouldn't think there'd be enough people in the state of Iowa to be able to do
That's
that,
right.
but who knows? So when, from a technical side, help us understand about the in-studio staff that it took to pull this off, as far as, you talked about the process a little bit, but editors, producers, cameramen, all of that sort of stuff.
We rented 2 hours of studio time
Okay.
from the TV station. So they furnished the camera on the show, cameraman, the lighting, the studio, and it came with personnel.
Tommy?
Chemistry between, most of the time, Charlie Thornton, who I remember as the main host of the Bear Bryant Show all through the 70s, and then Stedman. Sheely did it in 82, and we, of course, had Stedman on, and I think John Forney had done it in the 60s. But the chemistry between Charlie Thornton and Coach Bryant, how did that work? I mean, they had to, did they rehearse anything ahead of time, or was it all just ad lib?
All ad libbed. Charlie was wonderful about controlling the flow of it. Bryant would talk on and on and on, and we only had 58 minutes and 50 seconds, and we would be cut off. So, but Charlie was good about saying, well, Coach, let's get into the third quarter. Charlie was good. He was in control of making it move along.
Well,
I
Julie,
know Ronnie Robertson, who worked on the show for 2 seasons with the Frank Taylor advertising, said that you gave him the headset one time, or Frank Taylor gave him the headset one time and said, you're going to direct this show. And he had the headset on, and it was getting obviously near the end of the show, or either going to a commercial break, and Ronnie Bryant wouldn't cut. He kept talking. And that had to have happened a million times.
A million times. We had cards that we would be right behind the camera, and we would have a card that said 20 seconds, 15 seconds. We would hold him, and we would hold up 10 seconds, and he would say, oh, Charlie, I saw so-and-so's mom and daddy the other day, and they said, and we're saying 5 seconds, and he's starting, and Charlie would jump in and say, we'll see you next week for Coke and Golden Flake.
that's
But we cut him off probably almost every show, because he just went on and on.
How did Coach Bryant approach the filming? Did he enjoy doing it, or did he view it more as a responsibility, a contractual thing with the school or the Golden Flake, or did he really enjoy doing it?
He did enjoy doing it. He used the show to send messages to the players, to the coaches. Coach Mel Moore told me that they would never miss a show because it would tell them what kind of practice they were going to have on Monday and who was in good graces and who wasn't. And he said they all watched that show religiously. And it as a recruiting tool. He was very down home and easy to approach, and he was very, very good at using the show as a PR for his team and recruiting. One thing, remember back then, there was no ESPN. And this was the first time even Coach Bryant had seen the show. We would film it, process it, get it ready, and then we would have a film roll for him, a game film. And he would go in the sponsors booth by himself, could not be disturbed, with his yellow pad, and see the film for the first time and take notes all the way through. Sometimes Charlie was with him, but a lot of times he was there and he was not to be disturbed while he was watching the film, which was the first time he had really seen it.
Wow.
Other than seeing it live.
To have been a fly on the wall sitting in that sponsor's booth to hear that.
Don't you know?
Well, Julie, speaking of that, we talked about the fact he enjoyed doing the show, but how was his demeanor when the Tide didn't do so well? Maybe after a loss?
No difference. I was fortunate. I started in 72, and we won the first 9 games and lost to Auburn. And that was the first one I had experience. And the next year we won every game, and lost the bowl game, but we didn't do bowl game Bear Bryant shows.
Mm-hmm.
So I went, the first 2 years, we only lost one show that we lost.
That's a pretty good. Do you have any idea? You remember what your record was during the time you were producing the show?
No,
It was really good.
I could have
But
gotten
Tom-
that for you, Rick, if you'd let me know.
It just occurred to me. I just figured Julie might be the luck charm. We finally figured it out.
Well, Julie, when I wrote my story in the Crimson White in 1977, I talked about some humorous things that had happened between especially Charlie Thornton and Coach Bryant. Charlie said that sometimes they would tape up the Golden Flake potato chip bag. It would be difficult to open, and chips went all over the place when he tried to open. And Ronnie Robertson mentioned he had to clean them up during the commercial break a couple of times. And then Charlie said one time they put some bourbon in Charlie's Coca-Cola, and he about spit it out, and they were able to somehow hide that because nobody wanted to think that drinking a Coca-Cola would make you
Absolutely.
spit it out. Anything else happened? I think the trash set on fire or the ashtray or
as y'all know, Coach Bryant smoked. And we
Yeah.
would go to the film, and the film would be anywhere from 6 to 7 minutes each of the quarters, because we showed all the plays except penalties and injuries. So it was almost a complete play-by-play. Somehow a piece of paper got in there, and he threw his cigarette in there when we came back live, and all the smoke and flames were coming out. And Charlie never said a word. He picked up his Coke bottle and just poured it all. And as far as anyone could see, he was just pouring it on the floor. But it was live, and that's what you had to do.
That's
Yeah.
But
hilarious.
about him smoking, he would put his cigarette down in the ashtray, and people would ask me, "How do you make those potato chips steam when they're in that silver bowl on that set?" Special
That-
effects.
And he changed the product every week, didn't he? One day it may
Yeah.
be regular chips, and then barbecue, and then corn chips and cheese curls. And
He couldn't say. Golden Flake would pick a different product every week to feature.
yeah, was Diet Coke ever featured, or was it just
No, it wasn't.
original Coca-Cola?
One thing, this is how closely people watched that show. He was under the lights, so at the end of every quarter, when we went to the commercial, we would take the Cokes away and get fresh, cold Cokes out there. And people would say, "He never drinks those. He always has a full bottle, and he never drinks them from
Oh,
under."
that's great. Yeah.
Well, you talked a little bit about Charlie and some of the things that he did to keep the show moving. Tommy mentioned John Forney as well, and then Stedman that finished up. Talk about the co-host and any anecdotes you might remember, and just about how they sort of filled in and supplemented and kept things moving for Coach.
There was one earlier co-host, which was Maury Farrell, and he was the play-by-play man, but he was just there a couple of years before John Forney. Charlie followed John Forney, and Charlie was a pro. Now, when Charlie left, announced he was leaving, everybody was asking Coach Bryant, "So who's going to be the co-host? Who's going to be the co-host?" And I really don't know why he did this, but he said, "I don't know. You'll have to call Julie. She's going to pick it." Like I was going to tell Coach Bryant who his co-host was. And then they started calling me, "Well, who's it going to be?" And he called us one day and he said, "I would like for Stedman to be the co-host." And we went, "Yes, sir." He said, "He's over in the law library. Y'all go talk to him." So we went over there and talked to him. And Stedman did a good job as the season progressed. But the first show, Coach Bryant did like Charlie Thornton. He would bring him along and say stuff that the co-host was supposed to say, like, "This is the second quarter," or the score at the end. But Coach Bryant, he knew he controlled everything that went on the show, so it didn't matter.
And one thing Stedman did tell us was in the 82 season, obviously was Coach Bryant's last season,
Right.
and we had gotten beat the day before by Southern Miss, and Reggie Collier had kind of had his way with us. And Stedman says that Coach Bryant told him that morning, on that Sunday morning, that he was going to hang it up.
I heard him say that because I watched your broadcast of that. It was by surprise until he really made an announcement.
Yeah. And the show had already concluded for the season when he announced his retirement. So y'all didn't even have a chance to tell him goodbye, or this is the final show, or man, we've had some great memories. It had to have been a tough time.
It was something you did we would get there when we were at noon. We would get there at 4:30 a.m. in the morning and type up all the play-by-play and make the copies and get all the stuff ready. And Coach would come at about 8 and watch the film, and then we would record at 11 and then air at 12. Never got to see it or do any editing or anything, but people loved his hominess and in slick production like you see today.
Yeah. One thing I do remember was that Coach Bryant had challenges pronouncing names sometimes. Yes. Especially a few of our players, and Charlie would very affectionately correct him or just mention the player's name. And then Coach Bryant would, like you said, always be very homey and saw his mama and his daddy, and he's from Bogalusa, Louisiana, or out in California or whatever. And one quick thing before Rick asks the next question, I saw Jeff Rutledge last weekend at the Tennessee game, and I asked Jeff if the players watched the show. Now, Stedman said he did not, but Ronnie Robertson said, you better believe we watched it. And Jeff said yes. He said the TV room in Bryant Hall was packed on Sunday afternoons because they were all on pins and needles on what Coach Bryant would say and the tone that he would set that day for the practice the next day.
That's what Coach Moore told me also, that they would try to read him from the comments that he made.
Julie, are there any moments that come to mind, just funny things that maybe kind of hit the cutting room floor that folks never saw or were just almost little private things that happened with just the crew and with y'all?
There was nothing that we edited out, was live. The Bryant Show tapes are at the Bryant Museum. We donated those 20 years ago. But we don't have all of them because we were live. And when it went out, there was no recording. It was over-the-air television until Mike Stock's daddy. And Tommy said Mike played 72.
Right, 72 to 75.
Mr. Stock called us and said he lived in Indiana and could we record the show for him and ship it to him every week. And that was the first time we ever recorded the show. And we only have like the last 12, 13 years of the show. They're at the museum.
Was that, Julie, was it typical to tape over those year over year, or was it just that they were just kind of lost along the way?
No, we taped over a lot of them when we were, and you may remember this, there were not video cassettes or 1-inch tape. It was 2-inch tape and you would buy a 1 hour roll of it, and it came in a plastic carrying case. It was so heavy. And we would do 3 shows on that and then get a new tape. And so show number 1 and 2 were gone when we did 3.
Wow.
When it's happening, you don't know it.
Absolutely.
You don't know that 50 years later, nobody had any idea. Now,
go ahead, Julie.
One thing that Rick, you asked me about interesting moments. when Coach Bryant won his 315th victory, we had put together a little segment of people saluting him, and it was Bob Hope and Bob James and Dr. Rose and Reagan. And we had it ready at the beginning of the year, and it took us until the Auburn game before we hit that 315. But anyway, the 315 came, and the station people came to me and they said, Julie, there's somebody that called us on the private line, the red phone in the studio, in the control room, and they want to talk to Coach Bryant. And I thought, well, who could that be? So I marched in there and I said, I said, may I help you? And all my 28-year professionalism. And she said, we'd like to talk to Coach Paul Bryant. I said, well, I'm sorry, he's not available. Who's calling? And she said, the president. I said, the president of what? And she said, Ronald Reagan, the president of the United States. He was in the client room watching the tape, which I told you, you do not disturb the man when he's seeing his tape. Mm-hmm. Now, what are you going to do? You have the president of the United States on the phone and Coach Bryant. So I went down and I knocked on the door and I opened the door about this wide. Coach Bryant, President Reagan's on the phone, but I'll take a message for you if you want me to. I was terrified. And he got up and he went. And it turned out that President Reagan had called him in the locker room after the connection was not good, and he wasn't sure that Bryant knew was calling back. Coach Bryant was not happy.
That's hilarious.
Julie, I did see an article that at one point Golden Flake and Coca-Cola were going to maybe make the surviving episodes of the show available for public sale, but you said they were donated to the museum, right?
Right.
Okay.
We thought about that, and then it was the 100th anniversary of Alabama football when thinking about that, and we decided to donate them to the museum so everybody could see them if they wanted to.
Yeah. Well, looking back, what do you think the Bear Bryant Show pioneered in terms of college football and how it tells its stories today? I mean, now the coaches' shows are only 30 minutes. There's only probably 8 minutes of highlights.
Right.
They use, and so I just think it was a cultural phenomenon and set the stage for so many other coaches' shows down the road.
I agree. I think it showed the interest of the public in the details, and what ESPN is doing, I think, is what this led into, because of the great interest in the play-by-play and the commentary of the show from the coach. And today's shows they do it on the field after the game, and they have the coach for about 6 or 7 minutes, and then they edit some highlights, and it's not the same. And they come on at 10 and 11 o'clock at night. But it's, like I said, this was the first time anyone had seen any of the play-by-play. So, and Tommy, like you said, it was a big deal. A friend of mine's father was an obstetrician, and he didn't deliver babies.
Well, you know,
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he told me.
But Julie, it was just such a different time, and we didn't have the opportunity to be able to see the games. If you weren't there, it was such an incredible service to the state and folks beyond the state as far as the signal would stretch. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
And then when cable TVs came on, they used to get copies of the show from us and run them during the week. So it was the forerunner of the giant interest today in college football and the games itself.
Well, Julie, we really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and visit with us. It's given us a real look into the behind the scenes to understand a little bit about the show and a little bit about the people. And just thanks for sharing all your experiences with us.
I enjoy it. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Rick.
All right.